Hey guys, Michael Corsentino for Shutter Magazine. Welcome to my June lighting tutorial. This month we're going to be talking all about one light and some of the things that you can do with one light. If you guys are finding these monthly tutorials useful, as I hope that you are, then you'll definitely want to head over to behindtheshutter.com and pick yourself up a subscription to Shutter Magazine, where you'll find every single month every issue packed with all sorts of useful information, guaranteed to make your photography even better. Just amazing people in there every month, great content providers all sharing their hard-won information every month. You can pick it up at B&H, but even better, you can have it delivered right to your house. And a beautifully printed edition. So definitely look at that, behindtheshutter.com. And of course, you'll find my articles in there every month. So let's talk about what we've got going on here. This tutorial is really an outgrowth of a class that I teach, or that I taught this last year at Shutterfest, which is an annual conference in St. Louis, which is put on by the same folks that produce the magazine, Shutter Magazine. So the same people who write in that magazine are many of the people who you'll find teaching at that conference, and that is a great place to pick up fantastic information and to really take your photography to the next level. So definitely look at that. Pick yourself up a subscription to the magazine and check out Shutterfest 2018. Sure to be another stellar event. All right, so one light. So the good news is that no matter what you're doing with light, basically the same rules apply whether you're using one light. And we're talking about, when I'm talking about lights right now, I'm talking about strobes. So whether you're working with one strobe or multiple strobes, these same considerations and quote-unquote rules apply. And this is what I want to sort of start with, is what I call the principles of light. So basically, you've got four general principles that I like to focus on. And one is quantity of light, quality of light, distance of light, and direction of light. And we're going to cover all of these, and you're going to see that. So this, this is not one of my art-directed editorials that you've seen if you follow this channel and you follow my work. This is from the workshop. This is, just down and dirty, basic information for people who are just getting started. And I think that's really important. And that's why I wanted to do this, because when I teach at these conferences, I realize just how many people are just starting out and really need basic foundational information. So that's what this is really all about. And I think that that's why it's going to be really worthwhile for you guys. So quantity of light is basically, if you're working with manual light, which is what I would encourage you to do, quantity of light is just how much light. Do you want more light or do you want less light? And if you're working with manual, that's really as simple as turning the strobe, the power on the strobe up or down. Up to give you more light, down to give you less light. Right? Now, if you are working with ambient and strobe together, you're going to have some different considerations. I'm going to show you, most of what we're going to cover is studio, but I am going to show you a location, my kind of go-to location setup using one light. And in that case, shutter speed would control the amount of ambient light considered to the exposure, and aperture would control the amount of flash contributed to the exposure, as well as the setting that you have on the flash, how much power that you have on the flash, as well as distance and a few other things. But those are the general guidelines. All right. Quality of light is our next consideration. Quality of light means, is the light specular, contrasty, or is the light soft? And the way that we define those two, hard light and soft light, hard light is going to have rapid transitions between shadows and highlights. The transitions between your shadows and highlights are going to be rapid and hard, hence hard light. And soft light, the transitions between shadow and highlight are going to be very gradual. Okay? Quality of light is really going to be dictated by, well, a number of things, but principally, predominantly, by the light modifier that you choose and the characteristics of that light modifier, the size and the way that it's shaped, and the way that the interior is finished, and the level of the amount of diffusion that it has, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to cover some of that as well. I'm going to show you a couple of my kind of go-to light modifiers that I use. We're only going to pick out, I think, 3 or 4, and I'm just going to show you a few of the things that you can do with one light. Keep in mind, this is based on a 1.5-hour class, so I could go on all day about what you can do with one light. The big takeaway is that there's a lot that you can do with one light. Okay. Next is going to be distance of light. So the distance, and I put that right after quality of light because they work in tandem. The distance that you place your light is not only going to impact the coverage of the light, but it is going to impact the quality of the light. The closer that you place the light, the softer the light. The closer that you place the light to your subject, the softer the quality of light. The further away that you place the light, the harder the quality of light. Okay, and the reason for that is the closer you place the light, the larger its perceived size is in relationship to your model. Okay, the closer the light is to your model, the larger its perceived size in relationship to the model is, and therefore the softer the quality of light. Okay, and obviously if you use that in conjunction with a really large modifier that has lots of diffusion, you're going to get even softer light. And we'll talk about feathering, another technique, when I demonstrate this in this class, in this tutorial. Okay, and lastly, direction of light. Now, direction of light simply means if you envision your subject in the middle of an imaginary circle around them, from top looking down, there are different positions on that circle that are going to give you different amounts of shadow. Okay, so if you start with the light positioned at 12 o'clock at your camera and you're facing directly toward your subject, you are going to have a very flat light. But as you move that light either left or right around that circle to the left or right of your subject and your camera position, you are going to start to introduce more shadow. And I'm going to show this to you as well. So that's all with one light. So if you take one light and you augment it with a different amount of power, a different kind of light modifier, you vary the distance, and you play with the direction, you're going to be able to achieve a lot of variety with one light. Okay, so let's dig in here and take a look. For the class, I used a 1000 watt and a 500. Either one will be fine. With an indirect light source, like we're going to look at, one where the strobe is facing away from the subject and into the light modifier. Sometimes if you have a 500, it can be preferable, or a 1000, it can be preferable. If you do not have a strobe with that much power, you'll be fine. You may just have to use a little bit of a wider aperture. That's fine. I also am a big fan of meters, so for this class I used the Sakonic L478DR. It's a wireless meter. It allows you to take your meter readings wirelessly, and it's got all sorts of digital bells and whistles, which I really like. And you can control the power from the meter in tenth of a stop increments. You can see that here. That's 11.3. So 11 F11 and 3/10 of a stop is what we have here. These are Elinchrom strobes. They're what I used for the class. They're really good. You can use all sorts of strobes. This is just what I happen to have on hand for the class. Okay, so let's take a look at the light modifiers that I used. We are going to start with a beauty dish. This is a Mola Demi beauty dish, a 22-inch beauty dish with a white interior. And like I was saying, if this were to have a silver interior, it would produce a much more specular and contrasty look. In this case, we have a white because it's sort of more of the usual suspect and gives you a lot more variety and things that you can do with it. If I have silver, I'm kind of locked into that. Our next one, I think we kind of are skipping around here. Our next one is the 7-foot Elinchrom deep, or rather octa. It's a 74-inch octa. It's a very large source, and as I was talking about before, it is an indirect source. You can see here that our strobe is pointed in toward the back of the softbox, and this is kind of one of my go-to portrait sources, something that I use when I want very soft light. Also, I use it in conjunction with feathering, which you'll see. A little counterintuitively, it does have silver on the interior and only one level of diffusion on the outside here. However, it just does a great job in conjunction with feathering. Gives you a nice soft light with a little bit of specularity in there as well. So kind of the best of both worlds. Kind of what I like about a beauty dish, but this is definitely a broader source. And lastly, this is the Elinchrom 39-inch octa. It's a deep octa, so it's going to have a little bit quicker fall off. It's going to have a more contrasty, more specular, more dramatic kind of light. Here you're seeing it with and without the diffusion and the silver interior. Right? Any kind of time that you have a modifier with a deep shape like that, you're going to get a quicker, more rapid fall off, and you're going to get nice deep shadows, which is definitely something that I am a fan of. All right, so let's start off with our first look and our first light. So here we are using our Mola Demi beauty dish right here, and we've got that positioned at the 12 o'clock position on the camera. Like I was talking about, when you're talking about that circle around your model, this is how you want to envision it. So as we move this light around that circle, we're going to introduce shadow. So let's just get rid of that and kind of clean it up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now you can see here we've got this in the 12 o'clock position, and it is creating a very shadowless light. Well, basically the only shadow that we have is under our model's nose, and this is called a paramount light, and it's used a lot in beauty, or butterfly light as well. Kind of interchangeable terms, but those are the two terms that this lighting pattern is referred to. Every tick mark along that imaginary circle, here and here and here and here and here, etc., are all referred to by different names, and they're called lighting patterns. And this one would be paramount or beauty light is another way that the kind of shorthand that this is referred to. Butterfly light, paramount light, beauty light, because it is very forgiving. Because the more shadow that we introduce, the more lines are displayed, and the light becomes less forgiving as we move around that circle and create more shadow. Now that's not anything against shadow. I really love shadow, but in this case it's a particular look, and this is what you want to do to create this look. Great for headshots, great for portraits. Now you can see here that we have this catch light happening here, which is going to be determined by the height of the light and the angle of the light above the model. So you want to pay attention to that. Basically at about 45 degrees down, it's going to start to introduce that catch light. Using a modeling light will help you see that. However, we do have some areas where we can improve this. And if you see here, we've got a very deep dark shadow under our model's chin. So the next thing that I wanted to show in this class was how, by introducing a reflector underneath right here, and this would really be more kind of stacked underneath here at the same angle, 45 degrees up, and the beauty dish is 45 degrees down. It's kind of much closer actually, but you can see here that then opens up the shadow under the neck pretty demonstrably. It also opens up the eye sockets, just gives us a brighter overall look. And also, of course, the garment and everything else gets kind of opened up. So let's turn this back on, and you can see here that there is quite a difference by just introducing that reflector. So again, when you're using one light, the introducing reflectors, and we're going to go over this in increasing detail throughout this presentation, you'll see that it really will help you get a lot more mileage out of your lights, and even subtraction panels, even panels that take away the light, are going to give you a different effect. So even if you just have one light, you can use inexpensive ancillary tools that will really help you get a lot more mileage out of them. And it can be a piece of white foam core. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that you even costs you any money or very little money. And even some great reflectors don't, that are collapsible and all the rest of it, and that are legit. Reflectors don't necessarily cost a ton of money. So definitely look at reflectors and subtraction panels. All right, so what the next step is to move everything closer to the backdrop. So here now what we've done is we've taken the same arrangement that we had previously, and now what I wanted to demonstrate to you was how we can go from this dove gray background. We're going to talk about backgrounds in some additional modules within this presentation as well, but I wanted to start off by showing you just this simple thing, just by taking this arrangement and not changing anything about it. Keeping the distance, everything remains the same, the modifiers, the distance, the power, everything. And all we've done is we've moved this entire thing, this entire arrangement, this entire setup closer to the background. And by doing that with one light, we've given ourselves more illumination on the background. So if you only have one light and you don't have multiple lights, to control separately the background illumination and the subject illumination, this is one way that you can really modulate. You do need to have some space. You need to be able to move either back, away from the background in order to create a darker background, or closer to the background to create a brighter background, but that's how you do it. And so it can be a really powerful and useful technique. All right, so let's turn that off. Now we have introduced direction. So you can see what a dramatic difference that is. Here we've gone from this, which is a very shadowless look, very open, very happy, kind of approachable look, to this, much more moody, much more somber, much more dramatic, kind of evocative look. And I really love this. I would call this a more editorial look, for lack of a better term. And so you can see here that just by moving the light to the side of our model, we've got all this shadow introduced here, right? We still have our catch lights, we still have everything that we need, but we've gone and we've introduced, again, it's the same modifier, same reflector, one light, but we've completely changed our look, okay, just by modifying the direction, all right? So the next step is I want to show you how you can kind of vary this look. We can open up that shadow if it's too dark for our liking, simply by bringing in a reflector. And you can see that here. And again, that can be a 4x8 piece of foam core. It can be, in this case, it was a California Sunbounce Sunbounce reflector, the Sunbounce Pro. I think it's like a 4x6 reflector in white. You can use silver, also a silver reflector, if you're not getting enough fill happening from this light. So basically what's happening is this light is just coming in here and bouncing back off here and giving us illumination on that shadowed side of the face, right? All of this is much, much more open. Let's take a look at the before and the after, right? Now, I would argue that that's a little bit too much. So I wanted to show you how you can vary this, and that's just obviously subject to taste. But now simply by moving that reflector back, as we've done here, you can see here that we've lessened the amount of fill reaching the shadowed side of our model's face, right? Let's do that before and after. Very, very bright and filled in. And now a little bit less, but here's where we started off, right? So just one of the other things. Now, we talked about black block subtraction panel. That's what this effect is. So here we've gone from a small amount of fill to black block. So let's see if we can get back to our original. Okay, that's with no fill, and that's with black block. So we've got our subtraction panel. So it's even more shadow. Okay, now that's not necessarily a look that's working here or something that I would want in this case, but it is an effect that you can use, and sometimes I use it, and sometimes it gives me the desired effect. In this case, I probably wouldn't do that for this, but I wanted to show it to you. Again, just another tool in your bag of tricks that can be very helpful. This can be really helpful if you're working in a confined space where there are white walls everywhere and you're getting a ton of light bouncing around everywhere. What do? Maybe you don't want all that light. Maybe it's too bright. So you bring in a subtraction panel that is really going to help you. Okay, so just something to be aware of. All right, one of the other things that you can do is you can augment the light modifier that you're using. Now, this light modifier, the Demi as well as the Mola Demi, as well as most of the beauty dishes, come with something called a diffusion sock, which is just a piece of diffusion fabric that you can put on the face of this, all right, which we used, I think, in a couple of these shots. However, there's another tool that you can get, which has an even more dramatic effect, and that is a grid. So in this shot, we used a grid, I believe it was a 20-degree grid spot, and it's a honeycomb grid that you put inside the beauty dish. That's why you have that little ridge there, so that it can attach and use Velcro to hold it in place. And what the grid does is it confines the light to a very focused channel of light. And you can see here that what it's done to our background and what it's done to the light on our model. It's really created a very tight circle of light, and it's pulled a lot of the light off the background. All right, let's take a look at our before. Look at the light on the background and the model's chest, her garment as well, and now watch the difference, right? So, we've got a much tighter degree of fall off and a much tighter circle of light, and we've created kind of an in-camera vignette using this technique. So grids are amazing. I encourage you to check them out. All right, now we talked before about distance of light, so I wanted to show you this. Now again, here we are with same modifiers, one light. Now what I've done is I've taken that light and I've created a much bigger distance between my source and the model. And I'm also using this, in this case, there was no diffusion panel on the front of this. I wanted a nice kind of punchy specular light. I've moved it back far, which is helping me get that effect as well. I've increased my coverage. You can see here that now I've got top to bottom coverage of the model, and I've got this very different look than we had before. Again, one light, same modifier. All right, let's take a look at our next setup. So here we've changed models and we've moved on to our next lighting setup. And what I want to show with this lighting setup is a few things. I want to show you how you can create soft light using one modifier, and how we can use feathering to heighten that effect. All right, so here we're working with an Elinchrom 74-inch octa, and as we discussed in the beginning of the presentation, the light is facing in toward the back of the octabank, and therefore it's creating a much softer quality of light. We've got this big diffusion panel on the front, and here you can see that I have this positioned in front of the model, okay, and a fair distance from the background. So we've got this nice dove gray background, but we've got this beautiful soft quality of light here. You can see the transitions from shadow to highlight are very soft, and it's got a really beautiful effect. Now we can vary this. If you found that this was a little too soft and you wanted something a little bit more specular, I would simply move the light back a little bit further toward the model. So I wanted to show you that as well. So here we go. So you can see here now we've got our models up a little bit further, and you can see here that we've got this, we're working with this part of the light. Now in our previous setup, we're working with all of the light that is happening here, right? Which is the feathered light. This is called feathering. And I would argue this is where the most beautiful light happens, because with a softbox in the center is you're going to have a hot spot, and that is, now you can definitely use that. Again, there are no rules. These are guidelines and these are techniques. And sometimes you want that really punchy specular light. But for this effect, if I want something really soft and beautiful, I more often than not am going to be using feathering, and I'm going to be using it in this orientation where the softbox is, at this angle to the model. Okay, so let's take a look at, here we've introduced a little bit more light, a little bit more specularity, and you can see that we've got a little bit more brightness, a little more punch there. Eyes are a little brighter, not quite as soft, a little bit more light on the background, but still very pleasing, very nice look. And lastly, again, for working with a brighter background, I've taken that feathered look, that first one where the model is behind the octabank, and I've moved everything closer to the background. And you can see that that's brightened up our background and given us this really lovely gray background. All right. And next, I want to show you another effect using a smaller box, and this is one of the ways that you can control background illumination as well. Now I think that this is something, and I did a full video on this a few months back, so you'll definitely want to refer back for a full-blown tutorial on this, but this is basically it in a nutshell. I think that a lot of people work in very tight spaces, and they don't have a whole lot of space, and you want to really be able to control the illumination on your background. You don't want everything super white, you don't want everything black, and you don't want everything gray. You want to be able to have a variety of options, excuse me. You want to be able to have a variety of options at your disposal, and so without the space to do it, without being able to move your lights back far away from the background, and obviously you can move them close to your background, but if you don't have the space to give yourself the distance off your background that you need, you really need to have other techniques to get that variation in the background tone, and this is how you do it, okay? So we're going to start off. I want to show you what it looks like if we just start off with this. There's a 39-inch Elinchrom Deep Octa, and here we've got it positioned with the model, and we're nice and close to the background, and you can see here that it gives us quite a bit of illumination on the background. Lovely effect on the face. Everything looks really nice, but the background is pretty bright. Okay, so now by just putting a grid on there, and this is a Light Tools grid, one of their Easy Pop grids. It's got an internal frame, which is what I like. These are kind of the only grids available. They're a bit pricey, but they're really well built, and I think they're great. But so by popping a grid on there, again, we've taken, like we saw with that grid spot in the beauty dish, this is a soft egg crate grid is what it's called. And what it allows you to do is really take that light and focus it and channel that light into a very, very defined, narrow source and pull it off the background. You can see here, I mean, look at the difference. All that we did is put a grid on there. Nothing has changed, okay, except we've added that grid, and we've got a dramatic difference in our light. Now, we still have some light that's raking off to the side here and giving us this kind of split thing, which I like. I think that looks really kind of cool. However, I want to show you how we can take it completely to black, and that is just going to be, oh, well, here we've got an interim step here. I've added in a reflector because I wanted to show you how we can add a little bit of highlight. Let's go back to our slide here. How we can add a little bit of highlight over here to this side, because you can see here that if we open that up now, you can see here we've got that highlight happening here. We've brightened up the arm a little bit, and we still have our split where we've got this side some light happening here, which I think is pretty nice. All we've done is we've added in that silver reflector. Everything else has changed. But now to get back to my original point, I wanted to show you how to take this completely to black. So I believe in this slide we've pulled out the no, we left in the reflector, but what I did was I changed the direction of the light. So let's see if we can go back to this. So just by taking that light and angling it a little bit differently, you can see the difference there. Here we've got that, and then we've got that angled, right? Just angled away from our background a little bit. And just by doing that, just by changing the angle here and bringing it more to the front, we've still got this reflector, so we've still got a little bit of illumination, not a whole bunch, but a little bit. And we've angled this away. We're using our grid right here. I believe this was a 30-degree grid spot. And now we've taken our white background. Let's see if we can go all the way back to our first slide. From that to that, right? So pretty dramatic, change of light, again, with one light, one modifier, and we're just augmenting that one modifier and changing it up with some additional tools. All right. Now, again, there's just tons that we could do with all of these tools. I could only touch on a few of the things that we can do with one light. Like I say, I could talk about one light all day and just, but hopefully this gets you excited about the possibilities with one light and what you can do and the variety of looks that you can achieve. All right, so we focused on studio, but I didn't want to leave location folks out in the cold. I work on location all the time, so I did want to touch on that a little bit. This is one of my kind of go-to on location lighting kits. It's a Quadra Ranger. It's a 400 watt second pack with a really lightweight head. Again, that same Sakonic meter. A 27-inch Elinchrom Deep Octa, a paint pole, a shoreline paint pole to support the light head, keep everything very light. And with this modifier on, this is something that anyone can hold without getting fatigued. And then I use this little adapter, a 5/8 adapter from a company called Casey. And it is an adapter that allows me to attach this to the paint pole here, and then attach my light onto this part there, right? Just a baby pin stud. And also many times I use that in conjunction with a California Sun Bounce sun swatter. Yes, that will block the light. But you don't need that if you're working in shade, which is what I'm going to show you next. I'm going to show you the results of using this setup, just so that you understand what's possible with this. So that is behind the scenes, and there's an assistant holding that, so you can see how easy it is to hold this. Pretty simple stuff, yet And here we're using it we've got the sun as a backlight, so we didn't really need any kind of diffusion overhead with the sun swatter. However, it's a great tool if you are working in bright sunlight. So again, really lightweight, really easy, working in manual. Just took a meter reading, and now you can see the effect that we get with that simple arrangement just yields us something that is really beautiful. All right. So simple stuff. And again, for this, you're going to want to use the tried and true rule or guideline, which is that shutter speed controls the amount of ambient light that you have in the exposure, and aperture controls the amount of strobe that you have, as well as the power of the strobe, obviously, and the distance of the strobe to your subjects. But those are great rules of thumb. So in other words, if I wanted this exposure to be darker and to seem more like it was night, I would boost my shutter speed. And in some cases, when you do that, you're going to outstrip the sync speed, the maximum sync speed of your camera. And in that case, you may need to switch into high-speed sync mode, which I've covered in some other videos, so check those out. All right, kids, so that's going to wrap it up for this month. I hope that you've enjoyed this and it gets your creative juices flowing, and that you go out and explore the possibilities using one light and just change it up, try different things, use different modifiers, introduce some direction, try some different distances, and I think you'll be surprised at what you can accomplish. I will see you next month here on BehindTheShutter.com, and this is Michael Corsentino. Until then, have a great month.